It was just before dawn when a security guard at an abandoned mining site heard something faint, a sound so small it could have been mistaken for the wind. But when he followed the noise through the fog, his flashlight revealed something that froze him in place. Between two cold iron gates, squeezed so tightly he could barely breathe, was a lion cub. Its tiny chest rose and fell in ragged gasps, its eyes wide with panic and pain. The metal bars had closed around him like jaws. His paw twisted, his fur blood-stained where he had struggled to break free. The cub was too young to understand what was happening. Too young to know that the humans who had abandoned this place had left behind traps far crueler than predators. His cries echoed through the empty valley, cries of fear, of helplessness, of a creature fighting for a life that had barely begun. But what came next, no one could have expected. Because when one man risked everything to save him, the wild itself seemed to fight back. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications, so you don't miss any of the inspiring animal stories that remind us how fragile and powerful life can be. This is the story of a lion cub named Quito, whose struggle against cold steel and despair would expose not only the cruelty of men, but also the boundless courage that still lives in the hearts of those who choose compassion over fear.
The sun had not yet broken through the morning fog when Samuel, a middle-aged security guard, began his usual patrol around the abandoned mining site. The place was silent, except for the wind brushing against the rusted machinery and the creaking of old metal fences. He'd walked this path hundreds of times, flashlight in hand, boots crunching over gravel, his breath visible in the cold air. But that morning, something felt different, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. He stopped near the eastern fence line and listened. For a moment there was nothing. Then it came again, a sound so faint that he thought he'd imagined it. A soft whimper, somewhere between a cry and a plea. He turned off his flashlight, straining to hear over the wind. The noise came again, this time sharper. A cry of pain. Samuel frowned and followed the sound. His boots sank slightly into the damp ground as he approached the row of metal gates that once sealed the lower storage yard. The fog clung to everything, thick and heavy, blurring the edges of his vision. Then his beam of light caught something that made his heart drop. A small, golden shape wedged between two iron gates. At first, he thought it was a dog, but as he stepped closer, the truth hit him like a punch to the chest. It was a lion cub. The little creature was no more than a few months old. Its fur was matted with dirt and blood, its paw trapped between the twisted bars. Every time it tried to pull free, the sharp metal cut deeper into its flesh. Its eyes, wide and terrified, met Samuel's for a fleeting second, and that was all it took. The man felt something stir inside him, something primal and unexplainable. "Oh, God," Samuel whispered, kneeling beside the cub. "What did they do to you?" The cub whimpered softly, flinching as he reached out. "Easy, easy," Samuel said, lowering his voice. "I'm not here to hurt you." He examined the trap. The gate had rusted into a half-closed position, and the cub must have tried to squeeze through during the night, chasing after something or maybe just trying to find warmth. His paw was caught at an angle that looked impossible to free without tools. Samuel looked around. There was no one else for miles. The site had been shut down years ago after a collapse took several miners' lives. The nearest town was over an hour away. He knew what protocol said: call the authorities, wait for animal control. But he also knew that by the time anyone got there, the cub would bleed out or die from shock. He took a deep breath. "Hang in there, little guy. I'll get you out." The cub watched him warily, trembling but no longer struggling. Its chest rose and fell rapidly, and Samuel could hear the faint wheeze of exhaustion. He pulled a small crowbar from his utility belt and wedged it between the gates, using all his strength to pry them apart. The metal groaned but refused to budge. "Come on," he muttered, pressing harder. His arms trembled. The bar slipped. The cub yelped as the gate snapped back slightly, and Samuel's stomach turned with guilt. Sorry, he said quickly.
"It's okay."
"I'll fix it." He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked around again, desperate. His gaze landed on an old tire iron, half buried near a pile of debris. He grabbed it and jammed it into the rusted hinge. The cub whimpered again, but didn't pull away this time. It was as if the little creature understood that Samuel was trying to help. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Samuel's muscles burned. His palms were raw, but little by little the metal began to give. Just a little more, he grunted through clenched teeth. "Come on!" With one final push, the gate shifted. The sound of grinding steel tore through the silence. The cub cried out, jerking its paw free, then collapsed to the ground, trembling violently. Samuel dropped the crowbar and fell to his knees beside it. The cub's leg was bleeding badly, the fur torn, the wound deep. "It's okay," Samuel murmured, tearing off his flannel overshirt and pressing it gently against the wound. "You're okay now." The cub's breathing slowed slightly, its head resting on the cold earth. It blinked weakly, as if trying to focus on the man beside it. Samuel stroked its back carefully, feeling the frailness of its body. "You're too small to be alone out here," he said softly. "Where's your mother?" But he already knew the answer. There were no tracks nearby, no scent of other lions. Whoever had left the cub here, whether humans or fate itself, had meant for it to die. Samuel swallowed hard and looked out toward the horizon. The fog was beginning to lift, and the first rays of sunlight were spilling across the valley. He could see the glint of broken glass, old oil drums, and jagged metal, reminders of a place that once destroyed men and now threatened to destroy something pure. He couldn't leave it here. He wrapped the cub gently in his jacket, cradling it against his chest. It was light, frighteningly light, and its warmth seeped into him through the fabric. "It's okay, buddy," he whispered. "We're going home." The cub stirred weakly, letting out a faint, rasping sound that might have been a purr, or maybe just a breath too fragile to hold. Samuel carried him across the empty yard, his boots sinking into the mud, his mind racing. He didn't know how he was going to explain this to anyone. Keeping a wild animal was illegal. The sanctuary was miles away. But he couldn't stop thinking about those eyes, the way they had looked at him, pleading, alive. As he reached his old truck, he hesitated. For a moment he glanced back at the gates, those cold, merciless bars that had nearly claimed another life. He muttered under his breath. "You won't take him too?" He placed the cub carefully in the passenger seat, wrapping him tighter in the flannel. The cub whimpered softly, but didn't resist. Samuel started the engine, and the truck rumbled to life. As he pulled onto the dirt road, the rising sun cut through the fog completely, bathing the valley in gold. For the first time in years, Samuel felt something warm inside him. Not just hope, but purpose. Beside him, the lion cub opened one eye and looked up at him, fragile, trembling, but alive, and in that gaze, Samuel saw a promise. This wasn't just a rescue, it was the beginning of redemption for both of them. The old truck rattled over the uneven dirt road, each bump echoing through the cabin like a heartbeat. Samuel kept one hand on the wheel and the other hovering protectively near the small bundle beside him, the lion cub wrapped tightly in his flannel shirt. The little creature's breaths were shallow, almost imperceptible, its golden fur now dull and matted from blood and dust. Every few minutes Samuel would glance over, his chest tightening with fear that the next breath might never come. "Stay with me, little one," he murmured, his voice hoarse from emotion. "You've come too far to give up now." The cub stirred faintly at the sound of his voice, letting out a weak groan. Samuel smiled sadly. "That's it. Keep fighting." The road stretched endlessly ahead, cutting through a desolate landscape of dry grass and cracked earth. The sun climbed higher, turning the horizon into a blazing shimmer. Sweat dripped from Samuel's brow, but he didn't dare stop. He knew that time, and the cub's fragile heartbeat, were slipping away. He reached for the small cooler behind the seat and pulled out a half-empty bottle of water. Unscrewing the cap, he poured a few drops into his palm and held it near the cub's muzzle. "Come on," he whispered. "Drink, buddy." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the cub's tiny pink tongue flicked out, licking the moisture from his hand. Samuel exhaled shakily, relief washing through him. "That's good. That's real good." He drove on, the landscape gradually changing from arid plains to scattered patches of green. It had been years since Samuel had felt this kind of urgency. The last time was when he'd tried and failed to save a fellow worker trapped under collapsing steel at the mining site. That day had left scars he never spoke about, scars that had slowly hardened into silence, into solitude. But this small, breathing creature beside him stirred something in him that he thought he had lost forever. Hours passed. When the cub whimpered softly in pain, Samuel reached over, rubbing his finger gently behind its ear. "It's okay," he said, voice steadying. "We're almost there. I promise." He wasn't sure where there was, but he kept repeating the promise anyway, as if the words themselves could keep them both alive. By early afternoon, Samuel reached a crossroads, quite literally. The main road split into two directions. One led toward the town, where a small veterinary clinic stood. The other, an unmarked dirt track, wound its way deeper into the wilderness, toward the old animal rescue station that had closed years ago. He hesitated. The clinic would have supplies, but the people there. They might call the authorities. They'd take the cub away, and most likely they wouldn't save it. It was wild, dangerous, and expendable in the eyes of bureaucracy. But the rescue station, even abandoned, might still have cages, medicine, maybe old tools left behind by the rangers. He turned the wheel toward the dirt road. The path narrowed quickly, branches scraping against the sides of the truck as the forest swallowed them whole. The air grew heavy with the scent of rain and earth. Samuel drove carefully, avoiding potholes and tree roots. The cub whimpered again, louder this time. Samuel's pulse quickened. "Hold on, Quito," he said, giving the cub a name without even realizing it. "Hold on." After nearly an hour, the road opened into a clearing. The rescue station stood there forgotten and half-covered by vines. The wooden sign above the gate was cracked. The letters barely visible. Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, established 1993. Samuel parked the truck and jumped out, running to the passenger side. He scooped Quito into his arms, holding him close as he pushed open the gate. It creaked painfully, but it gave way. Inside, the old compound was quiet except for the hum of insects. Broken cages and empty water tanks lined the path. A faded mural on the main building showed smiling rangers releasing animals into the wild, a cruel irony now. Samuel kicked the door open and entered. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, streaming through broken windows. He laid Quito gently on an old examination table, his heart pounding. "Okay, buddy," he whispered. "Let's fix you up." He searched the cabinets, throwing open drawers and boxes until he found a small first aid kit. Most of the supplies were expired, but there were still rolls of gauze, antiseptic, and a few sealed packets of antibiotics. He cleaned the cub's wound as carefully as he could, his hands trembling. Each time he touched the injured paw, Quito cried out softly, his tiny claws flexing weakly. I know, Samuel said, his throat tight. "I'm sorry. Just a little more." When he finished wrapping the paw, he sat beside the table, staring at the cub's small, fragile body. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "You should be with your mother, chasing butterflies, learning to roar." He leaned back, exhaustion hitting him all at once. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of what he'd just done. He had crossed a line, saved something that the world might not want him to save. But when Quito shifted and pressed his nose weakly against Samuel's hand, the man smiled through tears. "You're one stubborn little king," he said. "You remind me of someone." Rain began to fall outside, soft at first, then steady. It drummed against the tin roof, a rhythm that filled the silence. The smell of wet earth and rusted iron mingled in the air. Samuel closed his eyes for a moment, listening. Suddenly, a sound cut through the rain, low, deep, and unmistakable. A growl. Samuel's eyes snapped open. He turned toward the window. Shadows moved just beyond the tree line. His heart pounded. He stood slowly, reaching for the crowbar still in his truck. Through the fogged glass, he saw them. 3 pairs of glowing eyes reflecting the dim light from inside. Lions, adult lions. And they weren't alone. A faint, echoing roar rolled across the clearing. It was a sound that spoke of territory, loss, and warning. Samuel froze. He knew what it meant. The mother was alive, and she had followed the scent of her cub. He looked down at Quito, who was now awake, his small head lifting weakly toward the window. The cub let out a faint, trembling call, a high-pitched cry that broke Samuel's heart in two. Outside, the response came instantly, a powerful roar that shook the very walls of the building. Samuel swallowed hard, realizing the impossible truth. She wasn't just coming for her cub. She was coming for him. The rain fell harder. The wind howled through the broken glass. And Samuel, the man who had spent years running from ghosts, now stood face to face with one of nature's most dangerous instincts, a mother's fury. The next move would decide whether this story ended in rescue or blood. The rain came down harder, soaking the earth until the ground outside turned to mud. Thunder rolled in the distance, deep and relentless, shaking the thin walls of the old rehabilitation station. Inside, Samuel stood frozen by the window, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. Outside, 3 lions paced just beyond the tree line, shadows moving through the sheets of rain, their eyes glowing amber like embers in the dark. One of them, larger, broader, with a mane already beginning to form despite her being a female, stood motionless. Her gaze was locked on the building, on him. Samuel could feel it, that primal energy radiating from her, rage and grief mixed in equal parts. He didn't need to be told who she was. She was Quito's mother, and she had come to claim what was hers. Quito stirred on the table behind him, letting out a faint cry. It wasn't a roar, not yet, but it was enough. The lioness's ears twitched. She let out a guttural sound, one that made every hair on Samuel's neck stand up. He turned toward the cub, his voice low but urgent. "Stay quiet, little one." "And please," but Quito whimpered again, his small paw twitching beneath the bandages. Outside, the lioness took a step forward. Her muscles rippled under her wet coat. The other 2 lions, likely younger males, flanked her cautiously, waiting for her command. Samuel grabbed the crowbar from where he'd left it, leaning against the door. His hands trembled, but he forced himself to breathe. He'd worked around wild animals before during his younger days, back when he volunteered at the sanctuary before it closed. He knew enough to understand one thing. This wasn't aggression for sport. It was desperation. She thought he had taken her child. "Listen," Samuel whispered toward the open air, even though he knew she couldn't understand him. "I didn't hurt him. I swear it. I saved him." Lightning cracked above, and for a split second the lioness was illuminated, her massive frame glistening with rain, her chest rising and falling with every breath of fury. The next instant, she let out a roar that tore through the forest. It was deafening, vibrating through Samuel's bones. The 2 younger lions began circling, their movements deliberate, their eyes scanning the perimeter. Samuel backed up slowly, his heart hammering. "You can't break through," he said to himself, as much to stay calm as to reassure the cub. "These walls are old, but they're strong." He glanced toward Quito, whose tiny face was pressed against the table, eyes wide and trembling. "Don't be scared," Samuel said softly. "Your mama's not angry at you." A loud crash snapped his attention back to the front. The lioness had slammed her weight against the outer fence, and the metal bent inward with a shriek. The other lions joined her, pushing and clawing. Samuel swore under his breath. He didn't have much time. He rushed to the window, peering through the shattered pane. The lioness paced again, growling low, calculating. She was no ordinary predator acting on instinct. There was thought behind those eyes. Samuel had seen that kind of intelligence before, in mothers who refused to bury their dead, in animals who fought impossible odds just to protect their young. He had always believed lions were symbols of strength, but right now, looking into her burning eyes, he understood something deeper. This was grief turned into a weapon. The rain grew heavier, blurring the view outside. Samuel turned back to Quito. The cub was shaking, his breaths quick and shallow. "It's okay," Samuel whispered again, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to comfort anymore. "I'll fix this." He searched the room for anything useful. Flares, tranquilizers, anything that might distract the lions long enough to get Quito to safety. But the cabinets were nearly empty. Most of the equipment had rusted away long ago. Then his eyes fell on an old emergency box near the back door. He yanked it open. Inside, a single flare gun lay buried under a layer of dust. He loaded it, his hands slick with rain and sweat, and took one final look at the cub. "Stay down, Keto, no matter what happens." When he opened the door, the cold wind and rain hit him like a wall. The lioness roared instantly, stepping forward, her eyes locking onto him with primal fury. Samuel held the flare gun low, his other hand raised. "Easy," he said calmly, voice shaking. "I'm not your enemy, look!" He gestured toward the open door behind him. "He's alive. Your cub's alive!" The lioness froze. The two males stopped pacing. Only the sound of rain filled the air now. Slowly, Samuel stepped aside, keeping the doorway visible. Inside, Keto's small form shifted, and he let out a faint, pitiful cry, one that sliced through the storm. The lioness's head snapped toward the sound. She took a step forward, then another. Samuel lowered the flare gun. "That's it," he whispered. "Come see him." But before she could move closer, a sudden roar erupted from the tree line, deeper, angrier. A fourth lion appeared, a massive male, his mane thick and dark as night. The lioness turned sharply, her growl changing from grief to warning. Samuel's blood went cold. This wasn't part of her pride. The new male was wild, scarred, his body lean and powerful. He had followed her scent, and now he saw weakness. In the animal kingdom, an orphaned cub wasn't a life to save. It was a threat to eliminate. The male charged forward, roaring. The lioness spun, meeting him head-on. Their collision was thunderous. Mud and rain flew through the air as claws and teeth met in a blur of violence. Samuel's heart pounded. He couldn't just watch. He fired the flare into the sky, the red light streaking upward and exploding above the forest. The lions hesitated, startled by the sudden burst. Keto cried out again. The lioness, bleeding but undeterred, broke away from the fight and rushed toward the sound. She reached the doorway, panting, eyes locked on her cub. Samuel stepped aside. For a moment, human and beast stood face to face, the storm raging around them. She sniffed the air, her gaze flicking between Samuel and Keto. Then slowly she let out a low rumble, not of threat, but of recognition. Samuel lowered his head, understanding. "Take him," he said softly. "He's yours." She stepped forward, gently nuzzling her cub. Keto whimpered and pressed his head into her chest. The sound she made then, a deep, trembling hum, was pure relief. But the peace didn't last. The dark male roared again, charging toward them. Samuel turned, panic flooding him. He had no more flares. No more time. He shouted, waved his arms, trying to distract the beast. "Hey, over here!" The lion's eyes locked onto him, and for a heartbeat the world stood still. Then it charged, straight for him. Samuel didn't move. He stood his ground, staring into the eyes of death itself. And at the last second, the mother lion turned, roaring with every ounce of strength she had left, and leapt between them. The sound of impact echoed through the storm, and Samuel fell to his knees, realizing what she had done. She had saved him, saved the man who had saved her child. And now one life hung in the balance as the storm swallowed them both. The rain refused to stop. It came down in sheets so thick that Samuel could barely see a few feet in front of him. Thunder cracked overhead, echoing across the forest like cannon fire. The muddy ground trembled beneath him as he crawled forward, eyes wide, heart hammering in his chest. The world was chaos, the kind that makes time stretch and bend, where instinct drowns out thought. Ahead of him, the dark male lion and the lioness were locked in a violent storm of muscle and fury. She had thrown herself between Samuel and the beast with a courage that defied nature itself. Their roars merged with the thunder, a sound so raw it could have split the sky. Samuel's throat burned as he shouted through the storm, "No! Stop!" But his voice was swallowed by the wind. The male's claws raked across the lioness's side, tearing deep. She stumbled, her golden coat streaked red, but she didn't retreat. She fought like something ancient, something that had lost too much to surrender now. She lunged, her teeth sinking into his shoulder. The larger lion roared and shook her off, but not before she drove him back toward the tree line. The ground shook beneath their weight. Keto whimpered from the doorway behind Samuel, dragging himself forward with his injured paw. His small cries cut through the storm like desperate prayers. The sound seemed to reach the lioness's ears. She turned her head for just a heartbeat, and it was her undoing. The male struck. His paw came down like a hammer, hitting her in the ribs and knocking her to the ground. The breath left her body in a ragged gasp. The male roared in triumph and raised his head for the killing blow. Samuel didn't think. He moved. Grabbing the crowbar from the mud, he charged forward, shouting with every ounce of strength left in him, "Hey! Leave her alone!" He swung with all his might, the metal connecting with the male's flank. The lion turned instantly, snarling, his massive body twisting toward the foolish human that dared to intervene. Samuel stumbled back, slipping in the mud, but he didn't drop the weapon. His whole body screamed at him to run. Every instinct in his blood begged for escape. Yet he stood his ground. The lion growled, stepping closer. Samuel's pulse thundered in his ears. He could feel the heat of the animal's breath, smell the blood and rain mixing in the air. "Go on," he whispered, trembling. "Do it. But not her. Not the cub." And then a sound, a roar, not from the male, not from the lioness, from Quito. It was small, broken and shaky, but it was enough. The cub had dragged himself to the doorway, his voice rising into the storm, defiant and desperate. The male lion froze, turning his head toward the sound. His eyes, burning with dominance, met the tiny figure in the doorway, a bleeding cub staring back at him without fear. The lion hesitated. It wasn't compassion, it was instinct. A lion that kills his own bloodline ensures his pride's end. For a split second, confusion replaced fury, and in that heartbeat the lioness moved. With a surge of strength that defied her wounds, she lunged upward, slamming into the male with her full weight. The impact sent both tumbling into the mud. She roared again, louder than before, forcing him back, her teeth tearing into his neck. Samuel fell backward, mud splashing over him. He could barely see, just flashes of lightning and the shapes of two titans clashing in the downpour. The ground beneath him vibrated with every blow. Finally, with a thunderous growl, the dark male broke free and retreated. His shoulder was bleeding, his pride wounded. He glared at the lioness one last time, then turned and vanished into the trees, his roar fading into the distance. The silence that followed was deafening. Samuel lay there, breathing hard, staring at the lioness. She was still standing, but barely. Blood streamed down her side, her breaths coming in sharp, painful gasps. The storm raged on, but her battle was over. Slowly, Samuel pushed himself to his feet and approached her, every step sinking into the soaked ground. She turned her head toward him, not in warning, but in acknowledgement. For a moment, their eyes met again. In hers, Samuel saw everything: pain, exhaustion, but above all, trust. "You did it," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You saved him." She blinked slowly, as if answering. Then her legs buckled. She collapsed into the mud, her body trembling. Samuel dropped to his knees beside her. "No, no, no!" He pressed his hands against her wound, his palms slick with rain and blood. "Stay with me. You can't leave him." The lioness's eyes fluttered open one last time. She looked toward the doorway where Quito lay watching her, his small frame trembling from the cold. Her breath came out in a low rumble, a sound that wasn't pain anymore, but peace. Then through silence, Samuel stayed there, his hands on her still body, his breath fogging in the cold air. The rain washed over them both, blurring the lines between tears and storm water. Behind him, Quito cried. Not the sharp cry of fear, but something deeper, something that seemed to echo through the forest, a sound no cub his size should be able to make. It was grief, pure and unfiltered. Samuel turned slowly, his heart breaking all over again. He crawled toward the cub, lifting him gently into his arms. The small body was shaking, his paw bandaged and dirty, his eyes fixed on his fallen mother. "She's gone, buddy," Samuel whispered, voice trembling. "But she saved you." She saved both of us. Quito pressed his head against Samuel's chest, his tiny claws clutching at the man's soaked shirt. Samuel held him close, shielding him from the rain. For a long time, neither moved. The forest around them was quiet again, the storm finally fading, the air heavy with the smell of earth and lightning. Samuel looked down at the lioness one last time. "I'll take care of him," he said softly. "I swear it." The cub whimpered, curling tighter against him. By morning, the rain had stopped. Mist rose from the ground, soft and ghostly. Samuel carried Quito to the truck, his steps slow and heavy. As he passed the old gate, the rising sun broke through the clouds, lighting the clearing in gold. He stopped and turned, looking back toward the spot where the lioness had fallen. Her body was still, but somehow the light made her look peaceful, as if the savannah itself had claimed her back. Samuel whispered, "Rest now, Queen." Then he placed Quito gently in the passenger seat, wrapping him once more in his flannel shirt. The cub was silent now, his eyes half closed, his breath steady. Samuel started the engine. The truck rumbled to life, cutting through the fog. As they drove away, the sun rose higher, spilling light across the wet land. Behind them, the wind moved through the grass in slow, sweeping waves, almost like a farewell. And though neither man nor cub looked back, both felt it, the presence of a mother whose love had refused to die, even when her body did. A love that had saved them both and left a roar lingering in the wind. The world was quiet after the storm. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings, though Samuel couldn't feel any peace. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles pale beneath the dried mud and blood. The old truck bounced over the uneven dirt road, splashing through puddles as the savannah stretched endlessly ahead. Beside him, wrapped in the same torn flannel shirt, the lion cub slept. Quito's breathing was shallow, uneven, but steady. His small head rested on Samuel's arm, his golden fur sticky from the rain. Every time the truck jolted, Quito whimpered softly, and Samuel's heart clenched. "You're okay," he whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. "We're going to get you somewhere safe, I promise." But he didn't know where that was. He'd left behind everything: the ruined station, the fallen lioness, the place that would forever hold the sound of her final roar. There was no going back. The only path left was forward, as the morning sun began to climb, painting the soaked earth in light. Samuel drove toward the nearest town, a place called Marula Bend. It was small, built around a dusty main road lined with fuel pumps, a diner, and an old veterinary clinic that serviced both livestock and wildlife. He'd been there once before, years ago. He just hoped the woman who ran it was still alive. By the time he reached the edge of town, the roads had turned dry and dust rose behind the truck in long spiraling trails. People turned their heads as he passed. A few children waved until they saw what was in the passenger seat. The moment they caught sight of the cub, they froze. Some stepped back. A man dropped his shovel. Samuel didn't stop. He parked in front of the clinic, a small white building with faded paint and a rusted sign that read, "Dr. Amari Wildlife and Veterinary Services." He jumped out of the truck and ran around to the other side, gently scooping Quito into his arms. The cub stirred, whining softly. "It's okay," Samuel murmured. "We're here." The front door was locked. He kicked it open. "Amari!" he shouted. "It's Sam. I need your help, now." There was silence for a moment, then hurried footsteps. The back door swung open, and a woman appeared, tall, dark-skinned, with a white coat thrown over dusty jeans. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, and fatigue lined her face. But when she saw what Samuel was holding, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Is that—" she began, stepping closer. "Yes," Samuel said breathlessly. "A lion cub. He's injured. His paw's crushed, but I stopped the bleeding." Amari's shock shifted to focus in an instant. "Put him on the table." Samuel obeyed, laying Quito gently down on the stainless steel surface. The cub whimpered but didn't resist. Amari slipped on gloves and examined the wound with quick, practiced movements. "It's bad," she muttered. "Infection setting in." He's dehydrated. You said you stopped the bleeding. Yeah, with gauze from the old rescue station. She froze. That place is still standing? Barely, he said. That's where I found him. He was trapped between two metal gates. I pulled him out. Amari looked up, her brow furrowed. And his mother? Samuel's throat tightened. She didn't make it. Amari's face softened. I'm sorry. He nodded silently, his gaze locked on the cub. For the next hour, Amari worked quickly, cleaning the wound, injecting antibiotics, and rewrapping the bandages with fresh material. Samuel stood by, helping when she asked, his stomach twisting every time Quito whimpered in pain. When it was over, Amari stepped back, wiping her forehead. He's strong, she said. He'll make it, but he needs care, real care. Constant hydration, feeding, rest, Samuel exhaled, relief breaking through his exhaustion. Then I'll stay. She turned to him, raising an eyebrow. You've got work, don't you? The mining company. I quit, he interrupted quietly. I'm done with that life. Amari studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, but if you're staying, you follow my rules. No heroics, no half measures. He smiled faintly. You've known me too long for that. Her expression softened. That's what worries me. They settled the cub in a small, heated crate lined with blankets. Quito curled into a ball, finally slipping into a deeper sleep. The sound of his breathing filled the room, slow, fragile, alive. Amari crossed her arms. You know the authorities will come when they hear about this. A wild lion cub. They'll want to transfer him to the National Reserve. I know, Samuel said, but you also know what happens there, she added quietly. He did. The reserves were underfunded, overcrowded, and often corrupt. Injured or orphaned animals were low priority. Many simply disappeared. Samuel looked down at Quito. He's not just another number, not after what his mother did. Amari tilted her head. What did she do? Samuel hesitated. His voice trembled as he said, She saved me. She died saving me. Silence filled the room. Amari's eyes softened. Then I suppose you owe her this. He nodded slowly. I do. Hours passed. Outside, the town returned to its rhythm. Motorbikes humming down the road, vendors calling, dogs barking in the distance. Inside the clinic, time seemed to slow. The steady rise and fall of Quito's chest was the only thing that mattered. By late afternoon, Samuel sat beside the crate, his chair pulled close, his rough hands resting on his knees. Amari had gone to rest for a bit, leaving him alone with the cub. He leaned forward and whispered, You've got a future, little king. I don't know what it looks like, but I'll make sure it's yours. The cub stirred, blinking open one eye. He let out a soft rumble. Not quite a purr, but something close. Samuel smiled. That's right. You're safe now. For the first time in years, he felt something bloom inside him, something that had been buried under guilt and failure, hope. He reached into the crate and gently stroked the cub's head. Your mom was brave, you know that? Brave and beautiful. You're just like her. Quito's small paw lifted weakly, pressing against Samuel's hand. It was clumsy but deliberate, an instinctive gesture of connection. Samuel froze, overwhelmed by the simple touch. He felt the sting of tears and let them fall freely. His head bowed. You're not alone anymore, he whispered. Neither of us are. Outside, the sky turned gold again, the kind of light that follows a storm. Warm and forgiving, in that quiet little clinic on the edge of nowhere, a broken man and a broken cub had found each other, two survivors bound by loss and love, by the heartbeat of the wild that refused to die, and though neither knew what lay ahead, both would learn that sometimes, from the ashes of tragedy, the fiercest bonds are born, and even in the cruelest world, compassion can still roar louder than fear.